We see the, joyous tone in the market, the upbeatness about inflation dialing back a bit. But in reality, things are incredibly painful if you're unable to afford your food right now.
Yeah, Caroline, we're clearly sounding the alarm bells at the World Food Program. We have about 345 million people today that are suffering from hunger. And that's up a double from 2019. And we're working in countries where you're seeing inflation rise by 20, 30, 40, 50, 60%. But it's also important to know that here in the United States, I think the average American spends about 10% of their wages on food. But in less developed countries, particularly countries that are very marginalized and have relatively low incomes, you're seeing that 50% of income typically goes to food. So you can imagine when inflation is up, say, by 24% in many of these countries, they're really hurting. And you have to choose as a mother or a father which child eats and which child does not eat.
What then are you doing to alleviate some of the supply issues?
So the World Food Program, on any given day, we have well over 100 planes, we have 5,600 trucks, we have 20 to 30 cargo ships. We're clearly advocating for free trade and make sure that trade, rice, wheat products flow as much as they can. We're also working with governments to make sure that we are substituting in some cases rice for wheat, making sure that the ports are unblocked, that trade is flowing. And also we're rallying, listen, I'm very proud that the U.S. government is the biggest provider, biggest supporter of the World Food Program. And at the World Food Program USA, we're clearly seeing the private sector step up in ways that we've not seen before. Because at the end of the day, if we don't have the funding to deliver services, the funding's not going to go out.
And Barron, the World Food Program said earlier in August that it planned to charter a ship from Ukraine to deliver grain. Where are you on that? When should we expect that ship to arrive in Ukraine, or has it already?
So we're very hopeful. That ship is near Ukraine. We're hoping that in the next few days that ship will be loaded with grain. But I would just say to the audience that it's not just inflation and Ukraine. We're dealing with issues like climate, the repercussions still of COVID. And let's not forget conflict, which is a significant driver of hunger. The most marginalized are always the most seriously impacted, the most devastated by conflict.
I want to go back to what you said. You talked about the U.S. government stepping up. You also talked about private sector stepping up here. I know you've had a recent particular agreement and joint partnership with PepsiCo, the foundation there in particular. What is it that companies such as Pepsi can actually do in this environment, Barron?
So first of all, I'm incredibly humbled that companies like PepsiCo, UPS, Cargill, and Epic Games, as an example, and John Deere and Company, that they've chosen to partner with the World Food Program because, number one, they know that they're going to get the desired impact by working through the World Food Program, and that we're going to save lives together. PepsiCo has a really unique program called Food for Good. There are lots of videos on the Food for Good platform. We'll take you on educate you about what's happening with food. There's also a desire from PepsiCo to reach 50 million people over the next couple years, making a financial commitment of about $100 million to go to zero hunger. And I would also say they have a platform, which I really agree with, where they're training smallholder farmers, particularly female smallholder farmers, to do better jobs with inventory control, training to be self-sustainable. Because let's not forget that even though there are crises around the world where there's the immediate need for food or people will die, there are also parts of the world that are able, through training, sustainability, smallholder farmers, to provide sustainability for their communities and take their products to the market.
What are you hearing from some of those farmers, as well as the partnerships that you're involved with, about a thing that you hint on before, trading down rice instead of wheat and using options that are maybe more available? What are you hearing from those farmers and those partnerships? Farmers
are telling us that climate change is the #1 issue that they're facing, that their crops are not living because of costs going up. Let's talk about fertilizer as an example. The cost of seed is going up. and the cost of transportation. They're having a hard time taking their products to the market. At the same time, they want more training around what crops should they grow that are more resistant to climate change. How can we make sure that water gets to the crops and irrigates them? And how can they use green energy to provide more sustainable solutions? So there's a very exciting part to what we do, but we're really relying on the private sector, not only for their philanthropy, but also for their innovation strategies to help the world survive and fewer people go hungry.